The US has carried out a second day of military strikes on Houthi rebel targets in Yemen. US officials say the new targets posed a threat to shipping in the Red Sea, which has been disrupted by Houthi attacks in recent weeks. Houthi leaders have vowed to retaliate following the attacks.
The aftermath of airstrikes on Houthi targets. The rebels said at least 5 people were killed as 2 waves of strikes hit 28 targets in parts of Yemen controlled by the rebels. The US and UK say these strikes were acts of self-defense. The Houthis are backed by Iran. They've been targeting ships in the Red Sea for weeks, with the group releasing this footage in November of its fighters appearing to seize a vessel. It claims the attacks are in response to Israel's war in Gaza against the radical Islamist Hamas organization, which the US, EU and other countries have labeled a terrorist group. A different ship, though, the USS Carney, launched another attack on Saturday, destroying a Houthi radar station with a missile. President Biden warned there would be more to come if the Houthis didn't leave shipping alone.
We will make sure that we respond to the Houthis as they continue this outrageous behavior, along with our allies.
But he also said the Houthis' main allies knew better than to escalate the conflict.
Iran does not want a war with us.
At the United Nations, the US once again pointed the finger at Tehran.
We need to also be clear about the role of Iran in these attacks. Without Iranian support, in violation of their obligations under Resolution 2216, the Houthis would struggle to effectively track and strike commercial vessels navigating shipping lanes through the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden.
Iran's ally Russia is currently waging a war of aggression against Ukraine, but it condemned the airstrikes, claiming they were against international law. There is no authorization for the arbitrary acts that the US and its allies are carrying out in Yemen. There is the risk of a full-fledged war, not only in Yemen, but throughout the region. It's a worry shared by some, including these protesters in Seattle. But Washington, once again, sees airstrikes as the least bad option to keep a conflict from spreading.
Hans-Jakob Schindler is with the Counter-Extremism Project in New York. I asked him whether the airstrikes would impact the Houthis' ability to attack ships in the Red Sea.
Thank you so much for having me. Well, I'm afraid this is not going to be the end of it. So what we need to reopen, really, the maritime strait, the Bab al-Mandab and the Suez Canal, is a sustained maritime military presence to make sure that the Houthis cannot capture and piracy any ships anymore, and we need to deter them from using their long-range strike capabilities. That's why the message from the US and the UK and the international coalition, who's already on the ground there, is both towards the Houthis as well as to Iran. Motivation-wise, the Houthis are a super anti-Western, anti-Semitic movement. Their slogan is, God is the greatest, death to America, death to Israel, a curse upon the Jews, victory to Islam. So we have to assume that they are going to continue to try to take advantage of the situation of the war of Hamas against Israel to gain favor within their supporters within Yemen. But the capabilities that the Houthis have are stemming from Iran, i.e. the Houthis, yeah.
Well, if they're getting their weapons from Iran, is there a way then that the supply chain can be cut?
We need to be much stricter with what Iran does in Yemen, right? So everyone knows where the smuggling routes go. Everyone knows where the supply chains go. Multiple ships have been seized. Therefore, the Strait of Hormuz is the waterway here where most of the long-range capability spare parts, the Houthis have the ability to assemble rockets. They don't have the ability to produce spare parts, are coming from. That needs to be much tighter controlled.
Right. Now, if the US military strikes can't deter the group from attacking ships in the Red Sea, are there other means of stopping this? Like, for example, can there be talks? What other means does the international community have?
Yeah, so a couple of issues here. The deterrence is going to be twofold. Number one, there is going to be a sustained military presence. There is going to be sustained strikes every time the Houthis do something. The Americans are trying to regain the escalation dominance here. You strike one ship, we hit 3 targets. That's the declared aim of the United States. Secondly, more controls on what the Iranians are doing in supplying the Houthis, in particular as the long-range strike abilities go. And thirdly, we need to be really serious about the sanctions that already exist against the Houthis and their violent behavior inside of Yemen. And that means we need to be much better in controlling the diversion of actual humanitarian resources, which the Houthis regularly steal, regularly resell, and which contributes a major part of their income in Yemen.
All right. Now, another question I really want to put to you is that instead of weakening the Houthis, could these strikes by the US actually give the Houthis more leverage?
Of course, inside Yemen, if you're attacked by an outside force, you always gain some more sympathizers in Yemen. That's the whole point why the Houthis doing this. They're feeling very comfortable with this conflict, as does Iran inside Yemen. What Iran doesn't want is the regional conflict. There are no regional friends of the Houthis outside the Iranian Islamic Republic. Just as a reminder, the coalition that Saudi led in Yemen in 2015 included, apart from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Sudan, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, and Senegal. So there's really no Arab state whose heart is bleeding for an Iranian proxy like the Houthis. So we just simply need to make sure that the Iranians understand that they are sleepwalking into a regional confrontation with the United States, which they apparently in the last couple of months do not want to have. Otherwise, they would have activated Hezbollah a long time ago.
Thanks, Hans Jakob. Hans Jakob Schindler, Senior Director at the Counter-Extremism Project.
Thank you so much.